Good afternoon to you all. My name is Valérie Lemarquand and I am attaché for science and higher education at the French Embassy in Sweden. So in charge of the relationships between French and Swedish higher education and research institutions. We're here today because 4 French institutes in the Nordic region have decided to launch in 2020 an award, the French Institute Nordic Award, FINA, to promote the scientific cooperation between France and the following Nordic countries: Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. 4 laureates, one in each country, have been selected for their multidisciplinary approaches to nature and biodiversity conservation, and they will go to Marseille to attend the IUCN Congress. In the meantime, and to prepare their participation to the Congress, the 4 laureates wanted to be in contact with researchers and start some discussions beforehand. The French institutes helped them for this purpose by organizing today's meeting. Moreover, in a way to get you acquainted with these 4 young researchers and anticipate today's discussions, the French institutes released a series of 4 podcasts which are available on Franska Podden. There, Helena Tukiainen from Finland, Justine Ramage from Sweden, Julie Strand from Denmark, and Annabelle Mempel from Norway presented themselves as well as their work. Now you have the opportunity to discuss live with them the dynamics of geodiversity and biodiversity, the impact of climate change on landscapes and the people, the safeguard of genetics, and the connections between nature conservation and international cooperation. Indeed, the aim of this meeting is to discuss freely together, ask and answer whatever questions we already have, although that will occur during this session. You have 2 options to ask your questions. Either you use the chat and I will relay them orally, or you can raise your hand in the reaction menu. When given the floor, you'll be able to ask directly your question by unmuting your mic and possibly activating your camera. Please don't forget to mute your mic when you are listening. I would like to inform that this meeting will be recorded. And now I will give the floor to our 4 laureates that will present themselves very quickly. So, Elena, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here. So, hi all. I am Helena Tukiainen. I am a geographer from the University of Oulu, which is in Finland. And currently I work as a postdoctoral researcher in an Academy of Finland funded project, which is called Improve Geodiversity Information in Assessing and Conserving Biodiversity. So in my work, I study the relationships between biotic and abiotic nature and their diversity.
Annabelle?
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Annabelle Mempel. I'm originally from Germany, but I'm a master's student at the University of Oslo. Before that, I studied culture and economy, and now I focus on conservation in my master thesis, where I look at the European Green Belt, so one of the largest conservation projects in Europe, but also in Germany, and I look at cultural landscapes with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Justine?
Hi everyone. So my name is Justine Ramage. I'm a physical geographer and I'm interested in the impact of permafrost on the landscape and the life of people living on permafrost in the Arctic. So I have a PhD in geosciences, where I looked at the impact of climate change on the landscape, on permafrost landscape in the Arctic. And since I finished my PhD, I worked more with the impact on the communities, on the people. And I also have a position as well where I'm still continuing looking at the impact of permafrost on the landscape. So I have a bit of more geographer background as Elena has.
Okay, thank you. Maybe to start the discussion and let it go, I have a first question.
Julie, maybe can introduce it.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
That's not a problem.
Yeah, Julie, sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm just gonna unmute myself so I can actually say something. Well, my name is Julie. I'm a PhD student from Denmark. I have a master's degree in biology as well. My work is primarily focused on how to safeguard genetic diversity within especially amphibians. I've worked a little bit with reptiles as well, but the main focus of my research is generally to develop and innovate techniques and methods on how to use cellular techniques for conservation of genetic diversity. And that's all for me.
Okay, thanks. So maybe just straight away, what are the similarities between the researches of you four? Are there some of them? And if yes, where do they connect?
So I can only, well, I do have a pretty fair idea of what the other three laureates are doing. However, I think our research is, well, we work in quite different areas. For example, mine is very focused on conserving genetic diversity, especially where I know that there's a broader, more geographical range within some of the other research, as far as I have understood. Mine is very specifically focused on conserving genetic diversity within a specific taxa as well. I don't know if anyone have something to add.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think one thing that connects our research is nature, but that's quite a broad concept. And we look at nature from different perspectives, which is great. But we are not in the same sector, so we are focusing on different sides of the nature.
For me, ecological connectivity is a really big topic, and kind of making sure that species, whether it's plants or animals, have enough space to actually develop and travel in between. So in that case, the biodiversity really as like a diverse ecosystem is really important. And this is also true for, different geographies and also genetics, where ecological connectivity is kind of this like habitat fragmentation really comes into play that we have to pay attention to in order to actually create ecosystems that are functional.
Yeah, if I can add something, I think our research is somehow disconnected and connected because we're looking at different scale. So I see the genetic, for example, part at a very small scale, maybe compared to more the geographic approach that we can have as well, looking at more how a global change can impact physically some environments and how that differs from in between different environments, and then on top of that, how can that impact the ecosystem themselves and the biodiversity. So it's very nice, I think, the way that the four research actually fit together at different scale.
Okay. Yes, we would like to have some questions from the audience, as the aim is really to discuss and to have an open and an open discussion. So it would be more lively if some questions came from all those who are attending. Yes, Björn.
Yes, hi. Very interesting to hear about all your research. I am a PhD candidate at SUM at Oslo for the Center for Utvikling og Miljø, Center for the Environment and Development. And I'm studying I'm a legal scholar, and I'm actually studying Chinese ecological civilization, and there's a policy about green development. Part of that is a policy on supporting biodiversity. And I was just wondering, in your research, if any of you have come across any efforts by China to support. I know that most of you are focusing on stuff that's happening in Europe, but maybe you're aware of support for biodiversity coming from China. And I was interested, if you do, if you know what mechanisms they may be supporting that research by, either sending scientists down on the ground to help, or yeah, just a general question. And it's fine if that's not on your radar at all either.
Thank you, Björn. Who wants to answer? Helena?
Yeah, thank you. That was a really interesting aspect. And my research is not in China, at least yet, but I know that in the field of geoconservation, so the conservation of the richness of abiotic nature, so soils and rocks and hydrology and geomorphology, China has done a lot. They have a lot of global geopark areas, and there are a lot of publications that publish work on that field. But that's kind of the other side of the nature, so the abiotic. So for the biodiversity studies, I actually don't have that much information.
Yes, Justine?
Yeah, I think if in the permafrost field, China is very active, actually, doing a lot of research, I mean, on the ground in the Tibetan plateau as well. So for a long time, I think the permafrost hasn't been the focus, or understanding the permafrost processes, or even the distribution of permafrost, so which is like permanently frozen ground. Hasn't been very much the focus in China, but we see more and more research, which is very essential actually for the whole permafrost like research community, because it's a very specific environment, quite different from the Arctic. So the whole ecosystem, it's more an alpine ecosystem there, and it's very crucial. But I don't know in terms of institutions what the Chinese government is doing.
Okay, well, Julie had raised her hand first, maybe.
Yeah, I just wanted to, well, I can only elaborate within my small field, which is biobanking of genetic diversity. And China is actually doing quite a lot within this area. They have invested quite a lot of money in new, highly advanced biobanks as well. So that's super interesting. They have some super powerful tools, which will definitely be useful within my area of conserving biodiversity. So China is definitely in the run when it comes to saving genetic diversity on this level.
Okay, Björn, you wanted to add something more?
Yes, no, that's really fascinating. I think I need to read up about your biobanking. I have just recently come across this literature, so that's very interesting. But another question that I have, and as a legal scholar, is, and you don't even need to answer this now, maybe later in your talks, about what suggestions you may have to legal scholars about legal innovations we could make or suggest or develop to protect or address major issues in your fields. That's something that I'm always interested to kind of join that gap between law and what is happening in the protection of biodiversity and natural sciences, to make sure that we also balance the needs of the environment with human rights and what, yeah. So if you guys have any thoughts on that, that would be interesting.
Okay, Annabelle.
Yeah, I also just wanted to quickly talk about China, I guess, but my research isn't that connected to China, but I know that so the European Green Belt kind of originated out of this former border between Germany, East and West. And it's really, really beneficial to look at it if you look at any other border conflict, because this is a border conflict that has been overcome. And to also look at border conflicts from a perspective of biodiversity. And lots of delegations from South Korea have come to Germany to actually ask the organizations and see the actual impact that they had, to kind of learn from that and how to see a future with North Korea. So I think that any border conflict can definitely be seen in a perspective of biodiversity, which I think is something that I hadn't really known before I started this research. And I think, to answer your other question, for me, what Germany kind of deals with the most in terms of biodiversity is also EU laws. And I think there's still a huge potential there to kind of make sure that we don't just agree on these laws, but then also implement them very alike, even though countries are obviously the same. But implementing what the EU kind of wants and the goals that they have is a really big issue, especially when we look at agriculture and then again at biodiversity. And I think that this cooperation between these countries, that not just between organizations, but also between governments, and whether this is local or regional or national governments, is really, really important, because the European Green Belt also has huge issues working with Russia, because conservationists there have much more different opportunities than conservationists in other countries.
Okay, do some of you want to add anything, or has already some spontaneous answer to the second question of Born? No, it's complicated. Thanks for asking. I think you gave good suggestions, and there will be certainly works to do and lots is to be done in that direction. Are there any other questions, please, among the attendees? No, not yet. So maybe just to go a bit further, could you tell us how others in general, that is maybe participants to the IUCN conference, how do others, how can they add something, contribute, or connect to your research? What would you expect, or what would you suggest in this way? Who wants to give some advice first? Judy?
Well, I can, from what I'm hoping to gain from the conference as well, is of course a larger network. The network in which I work is quite small. Biobanking is still an upcoming conservation field, and because I work specifically within one class, amphibians, it's even narrower. So I would definitely hope to establish some connections to other laboratories, other researchers who might not work in amphibians, but in general cell culture and how cell culture can be used to conserve biodiversity in general. For me, it's definitely super important to expand the network because it is so small. So that would be one of my main goals which I could hopefully achieve from the conference, because there's going to be so many different task force groups which work, for example, within amphibians. But again, because the IUCN network is a huge network, there's definitely some great possibilities of catching up with other researchers. For example, biobanking can be combined with other conservation tools, such as assisted reproductive techniques. And it would also be super interesting to get in touch with researchers who are more focused on these techniques and how to combine it, and how to make the most out of two different conservation tools, but two conservation tools which can be combined and be even stronger when combined, if that makes sense.
Okay. So you would like to convince people also to work with you and to enlarge the community of people.
Yeah,
so
it's very important, I think, within research in general, just to share the knowledge, and especially for me, who works within such a small field. We don't all have to make the same mistakes in the lab if we actually share what's working, and for me, more importantly, what's not working.
Yeah.
Because within a field where the state of the art is so narrow and so limited, it's just as important to find out what other people have been trying to do, what protocols, what media types, etc. So we don't all have to do the same, but we can work together in establishing these protocols, which are definitely more successful, and not everyone have to start from scratch.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
What would one of the three others answer to how can others contribute or add to your research? One. Yes, Justine?
Yeah, I think in my field there is very little research on ecosystem services in the permafrost region. So it's quite a large region because it goes beyond any national borders. It's all land that have a ground that is below 0 degrees Celsius. So it's like almost 25% of the whole northern hemisphere. But there is no really quantification of the ecosystem services, so the services or the benefits that people get from the nature. So without this, we cannot really understand what is the impact of permafrost thaw. So we see that permafrost is thawing because the air temperature is just rising and a lot, especially in the Arctic. So there are large impacts, and we see that it impacts at a global scale because of the release of greenhouse gases. But for the people living in these regions, we don't really understand what is the impact. So I think going to such, I'm not, I don't have the hope to meet people working in the same area, because there are not that many, but at least there is a lot of research on ecosystem service in general for other parts of the world, and getting to know more about different methods that are applied in other places, and with also considering scales. Would be very beneficial, because it's a very, very large field, and knowing how to address it for a specific region would be very good. And as Julie said, it's also a good way to hear, like to see what are the good, or successful research or ways, or what are the new ways of research in this field, and what is actually maybe not recommended to you. So in that sense, I think it would be very good for me to network with people working.
Yeah. maybe before I give the floor to Elena, I have well, a remark. You said it's a very wide well, area, but I guess it's also multidisciplinary what you do. So you maybe have to meet people which are dealing with something totally different from the geographical area, but still who could help you. Is that also some issue or?
Yeah, exactly. It's more about the methods, the tools that can be used and applied in whichever. Then you just add the parameters might be different from a region to another, but there are some methodologies that are commonly used, because then you can make comparisons between a region, and that's very important, I think, to fit into a global research framework.
Okay, Helena.
I'll just click away the hand. So I think with Justine, we had a similar situation that we are in, or our interests are in a wide scope or in an area that that is studied a lot, or it contains a lot of information on different fields. So I'm interested in my research in the diversity of the whole nature, so both abiotic and biotic. And I think that the Congress would and will give me good insights of what is the state of the conservation today. There is, for instance, a working group, Chair Heritage working group. So Chair Heritage is the part of the geodiversity that needs to be protected. So I would like to hear what they have been up to. And in another way, I would like to connect with biodiversity researchers and to discuss with them that also the abiotic nature has to be taken, or how could it be taken better into account in nature conservation. So I have interests in a really broad scale, and I'm happy to meet a broad scale of researchers or people to discuss different subjects. And I think that this kind of interdisciplinary conference on nature conservation is really good for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Annabelle.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with the others, just to meet different researchers. But I think for me also it's about bringing this idea of international cooperation for conservation to others and kind of showing how it has worked with the European Green Belt, but also to see where the potential lies, and kind of also to promote a little bit of a more qualitative research methods, because I think a lot of this is quantitative data, and a lot of conservation is about protecting ecosystems and biodiversity from the numbers that we have, or the species that we have. But everything we look at is such a cultural issue that you can't really forget the cultural institutions, as small as they might be. So if this is museums or small conservation groups or even local communities, and that is something that I think has to be connected much more, because conservation is a really big effort, and it's really difficult to find resources or financing or any other opportunities for this. So we have to support these small institutions. So I would really like to talk to big organizations that might have lost their focus on small scale institutions that are really, really important for the landscapes that we have. And also this idea of international cooperation, making this much more accessible, because even though it's something we all do, there's so much potential in it that is kind of hindered by laws or different issues such as languages or communicating in general. So that is something that I would really like to focus on meeting in this international organization and conference as well.
Okay. And well, I see that our attendees are majorly listening. Yes, Laurel, thanks for taking the floor. Hi. You have to unmute your...
Sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you very much. That was why I was attending this session, was to hear what you were hoping to get out of the Congress. So I work for Parks Canada in conservation policy and intergovernmental collaboration. And I am sort of planning the Canadian exhibition at the Congress exhibition site. And given the pandemic, we're not sure how many people are going to be able to participate from Canada. We have quite strict travel limitations right now, and we don't know. So I'm just thinking of this as an opportunity of we might be able to pull in other people to connect virtually to folks at the Congress and through our exhibition stand. And I'm just wondering, those answers that you guys gave were very helpful, thank you. And is there, I see there's a lot of opportunities in the research you're doing to connect with ecologists and conservation biologists working in our national parks. What level of, are you hoping to connect with practitioners? Are you hoping to connect more with policymakers? Sort of what would help you the most?
Yeah, I can start with that. That's so interesting to hear. And I was actually, before I chose to go to Germany for my fieldwork, I was looking at conservation in Canada. So that's really, really interesting. And I think there's lots of similarities there as well, especially with national parks and kind of this idea of community-based conservation. I think I look forward most to meet people that I'm not able to reach on my own. So I think, going on field work, I was able to talk to people from national parks if they had time, but also talk to tourists, people from museums, or even just people who live in the area that I was looking at. So that was quite easy for me to get access to. And I think now I'm really looking forward to meeting people that would be very difficult to have access to. So of larger organizations, for example, or people who actually make very important decisions for larger areas. So I think policymakers would definitely be most interesting because they have a huge impact on what actually gets implemented and also where funds go and where the focus is kind of being put. So I think that would definitely be really interesting. But also people from outside of Europe who work in a similar field. So I think there's lots of similarities between biodiversity areas or protected areas in general across the world, but I think it's very difficult to connect from people from other continents. And in Europe, it's quite easy to get in touch, but other countries, I think, would also benefit from the more European way of conservation.
Thank you.
Yes, Helena.
So thank you for the question, and it's nice to hear about the possibilities in the conference. Well, as a researcher, for me, the most important thing is the most important things are to make the research themes visible. So what I would like to emphasize is that also the abiotic nature is considered in nature conservation, and to find out how it has been considered in nature conservation, because I know that it has been already. And my topic is geodiversity, so abiotic nature as a whole, so rocks, soils, hydrology, geomorphology, topography, everything. So I'm here to speak about the whole geodiversity and to see how it has been recognized. And to continue my research, it's also important to connect with people who could be part of the research. So I'm interested to hear what kind of data there is for biodiversity or geodiversity, for instance, in protected areas. I have made a research in Finnish protected areas or in Finnish national parks about how threatened species richness from several taxa is connected to geodiversity. And that's like a framework what I would like to investigate also in other areas. And third, also, I would like to share my message with practitioners and politicians, because I think it's important to consider nature as a whole.
Yes, Justine.
Yes, thank you, Laurel, for your question. So in my case, I have been actually working a lot in Canada. And from the perspective of merging permafrost and people, I think what would be very crucial would be to actually meet communities. I'm not sure how much of them will be represented at the IUCN, and like with the pandemic, it's going to be probably way less than it should. But actually, that's the. I think this meeting, of course, politicians is something interesting. But I think in terms of permafrost research, you know, we are not at the stage where we can really, I mean, make strong recommendations, because it's just we need more information now. We are still it's still a field that is growing. So there have been some recommendation for the Arctic Council, for example, but yeah, in general, it would be very interesting for me to meet communities, like local communities that are affected by, I mean, not necessarily permafrost, so, but in general climate change, and to discuss, like to hear their voice and their way to adapt their or yeah, so more like for me, that's the local vision that I would like to get.
Thanks. I think, Justine, for you there, hopefully we were hoping to have a couple of Indigenous communities represented. We'll see, but this is good to know, because we can hopefully try and make connections. September is an awkward time for a lot of our Indigenous partners, because they're out on the land, and it's September is harvest time. So it might be a little bit awkward, but we can certainly, I think, and Helena too, we can certainly help make connections. So this is really useful. Thank you. I don't know if, Julie, I don't know if you had anything.
Hi. Yeah, it was definitely, it's very interesting, and it's really nice to hear that you're actually able to put my fellow laureates into connection with people in Canada. That's really nice. As I told you, mine is probably quite specific in terms of meeting other researchers, but of course in general, on how to implement a new conservation field strategy, like I'm working on, into the, you know, best practices and the general conservation strategies within, for example, amphibians. I would be very interested in how we are able to implement it into policies and the current work that's going on as well.
Okay, maybe I could add, as you spoke about indigenous partners, that the French Institute Sweden will be founding the travel of Sami representatives. So normally there will be someone from the Sami who will be attending in Marseille.
Very good to hear.
Okay, some more questions? Well, that was something that was already that appeared in your or what you said, but maybe you could tell us more precisely if and how the pandemic has affected your research.
For me, I did a lot of field work in national parks or protected areas like UNESCO or heritage sites in Germany. And this was last year in September. And I think that there was a huge spike in tourists within their own countries actually going out and looking at the nature that we have. And I think lots of protected areas weren't quite prepared for that. But I think the pandemic has kind of shifted this idea of having to go away to see nature somewhere else, to actually being within your own country and also experiencing the nature there. But at the same time, these institutions like national parks or tourist centers also have to be prepared for this. And I kind of noticed that lots of resources are lacking within any conservation institution, whether this is people or financing or kind of also organizational and communicational help. And I hope that the pandemic kind of has put the priority within those types of institutions that can also handle this peak of tourists within their own countries, because I think especially within Germany, this is really important to kind of along the Greenbelt, you learn a lot about history and a lot of about German identity as well. And visiting that and actually knowing about it and also sharing this idea about it, I think is really important, but it has to come from somewhere. And the resources, I think, are definitely lacking for that. So I hope that this is going to change after the pandemic. Also, when we can travel abroad again, which I know lots of people are looking forward to, but yeah.
Yes, Justine.
Yes, so in my case, I haven't been that much affected because I was lucky enough to have my data before that. But I know a lot of researchers in my field haven't been able to go to reach like places where permafrost is. So in that case, it has actually been a very big problem, especially from long-term records, because even though we have some measurements that are ongoing throughout the year, we need to go and maintain them. So in that case, it's a big gap in the data. But also the positive aspect was that it triggered more cooperation with the people living in remote areas. I mean, we were already working with assistants in Canada, actually, in different coastal communities. So and we see that basically this collaboration is just getting stronger. So it's a good thing because it gives also the local people or indigenous people the opportunity to do some research together with researchers.
Yes, so it has also good sides, and if it can get people more involved in what you're doing.
Exactly, yeah, in that case, yeah, it was.
Okay, Julie?
Yeah, well, for me, this pandemic has been really hard. I wasn't as lucky as Justine to have all my data beforehand. So I was actually in Canada at the University of Moncton. I had just like arrived 2 weeks prior to the entire world closing. So I missed, unfortunately, a 4-month stay in Canada, where I was supposed to learn more about the field that we call cytogenetics. So kind of the field of where you study chromosomes, more or less. And that would have been very interesting for me to add as an additional layer on top of the research I do today.
Julie, we don't hear you. Maybe you could just we don't hear your image. We didn't hear you. Could you perhaps stop the camera and try to only speak without the image?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's my internet connection, unfortunately. So I don't know how much you heard.
That it was a pity you couldn't stay in Canada because you couldn't collect data. But then I think it was all.
Okay. Yes, I was at the University of Moncton to study cytogenetics, which is the study of chromosomes. And for my area, that would have been a very interesting layer of information to put on top of the genetic material we are able to collect. So that was very, very unfortunate, because it's going to be my PhD is ending, so I won't be able just to redo this stay, unfortunately, but hopefully it will be possible for some other time. But yeah, this pandemic it's been really hard on my PhD, because I was so lucky that I actually had the funding to go, which is rare. And then it's cut short by this global disease, which just yeah, it was a very strange time, and unfortunately it's not been that positive for me collecting data since then, because it's been really difficult with closed universities and everything. Yeah.
Okay. Helena?
Yeah, I also have the same experience of having the field data gathering delayed. I'm working in a project that has started 1.5 years ago, and there's this new local scale geodiversity method that we are using, and we got to use it last summer inside Finland, but all of our partners of cooperation in other countries, they had their field work season delayed. So the COVID has had an impact to that. But maybe if something positive can be said, like Justin found great, also positive sides, it is maybe that some study ideas have been raised up due to the health issues. And also I think that this whole situation has really improved the communication online. There have been online conferences and online meetings, and that's one of the good things, although I also miss the on-site meeting of people.
Yes, of course, it gave us more possibilities to attend conferences all over the world without traveling. Of course, the drawback being that we can't discuss and share a drink after the discussions. Maybe as the time is passing, what is well, I have two questions. I don't know which order is the best. Maybe I'll put it all together, and you try to choose in which order you want to do it. The Congress will take place in Marseille, in France. And the question is, well, you said you would like to meet people to enlarge your network, but have you more precise ideas about which institutes you would like to visit, which teams you intend to meet, and then what is then the main message you would like to share with the participants of the Congress? Well, then maybe the first part of the question, or if you're not as yet precise, what's your main message you want to bring them? Yes, Helena.
So these are two big questions, I think, but if I summarize them quickly. So to the first one, I had the challenge that I will be only online in the conference. So I really wish that despite of the being only online, I would have the chance or the opportunity to connect with people. For instance, working with geoheritage or protected areas or institutes working on different fields. I have no specific wishes for that. I think that being online determines a bit of my participation this time. And to the second question, so what's my main message? I would say that in a really short way that the diversity of abiotic nature is important. And besides that, it has conservational value itself. It could be used in biodiversity conservation more efficiently than it is now.
Okay, thank you.
I think for me, it's a very similar answer to before. I would really like to meet people who make very important decisions for how we deal with biodiversity. This would be UN environmental program, or also people I know who are there from the Convention of Biological Diversity, which is the foundation to a lot of policies that are being made, and also people that you just don't have access to in Europe, so people from outside of Europe. But I think what I really would like to communicate is, a really common phrase within conservation is that, nature knows no borders. But if we really look at it, there are so many borders, and even if they're only administrative, that disadvantage what we research and what we do, and the potential is so great that I really hope that there's a lot more of a transnational cooperation on conservation, and not just on climate change, but specifically on nature protection, which I think is the potential isn't used, and that is hopefully something I can communicate.
Thank you. Which of Justine or Julie want to have the floor?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I don't have any specific, I haven't looked specifically at the attendee, but yeah, I think any institution, as I said, working with ecosystem services, but also like working in the within the polar environments or alpine environment would be very interesting. And I'm French, so also there is a good opportunity here to meet the French organizations and research institutes that are working in this field and see what they are doing and who is doing what and where in France. So I see a big potential. And on the message, I mean, it's kind of broad, but so far it's more like on the, I think, diverse impact of climate change, or on permafrost environments, and also on the diversity of impact of the thawing permafrost on the communities living on permafrost, which are very different ones. And yeah, so it would be the message that this is important. Permafrost thaw is important not only for the global at the global scale, but also at local scales.
Okay, thank you, Justine. And Julie?
Yeah, I think, is my connection good enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I haven't had time to look at the specific attendees as well, also because I think a lot of people are just gonna decide if they're gonna attend pretty late, unfortunately, to this conference due to the travel restrictions and so on. But I'm definitely interested in some of the specifically in the amphibian tax and what IUCN works with within conservation strategies for vertebrates mostly. So that would be something I would look into in terms of trying to figure out who's actually attending from these specific groups. And my general message is that it's important that people understand how biobanking can be used within conservation, and how it is an important tool when it comes to conserving genetic diversity, specifically within all vertebrate taxa, but especially within amphibians.
Okay. Well, anyway, as we don't, of course, know who will attend, but as you will be in France, well, most of you, you will, of course, be able to meet institutes and teams from institutes that are in France, and that's also one of the aim of your travel, and we will help you in this direction. So there will be, well, all the French part that anyway will be there. So we thank you here for this really interesting webinar and discussion. We hope that it will be it will be helpful, and that you will have a fruitful and successful participation to the IUCN conference in Marseille, that be it virtually or physically, and will of course keep an eye on you and communicate about your adventure. So thank you for being with us today, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.